distinguished participants. As a good African, I grew up in a neighborhood where some people believed in ghosts. And people called us superstitious until this idea of working virtually came into being. So if generally in my village you talked to yourself, people would think that you had a particular mental illness. Technology has made all of us to share the capacity to talk to ourselves or to talk to people who we are not in the same physical space with. That either makes us highly superstitious, highly religious, or ultra-modern. And this particular Tana is, for many reasons, special. It is special in the sense that it's the first hybrid, and we are doing our day 3. But the other reason why it is special is because a good number of our delegates are not going to be in the room, and a good number of presenters are not in the room. For those who are joining us online and those in the room, we will still observe Chatham House rules, which means for the robust debates we're going to have, which are supposed to be candid and informal, we're going to ask that where possible, please no attribution to people's institutions, so that we can have the spirit of Tana is retained. The other capability that working virtually brings to us is that in most meetings it's difficult to achieve gender balance either on panels or in participation. The virtual platforms are such that the limit is only as far as we're willing to either imagine or enforce. So what I'm going to ask you to do is first to explain to you that the next panel would have been perfectly gender balanced, but for the fact that some of the intended speakers are, for reasons beyond the control of the organizing team, unable to join us. But those who have been able to join us are not only high level, you become a Tana graduate, then you become Tana alumni, then you become Tana senior fellow, postgraduate, then you become Tana professors. So we are privileged to have those who have accompanied Tana for a very long time. I will call them to the stage and our moderator will introduce them. We will be joined virtually by His Excellency Vincent Biruta, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Rwanda. Excellency, welcome to the virtual platform. Amakuru. I'm quite sure he's going to hear. We are also going to be joined virtually by Dr. Stephen Karingi, who's the Director of Regional Integration and Trade Division at the Economic Commission for Africa. Dr. Karingi, welcome. In the room with us, we have His Excellency Ambassador Abdoulaye Diop, who's the Chief of Staff of the African Union Commission. I'm going to invite Ambassador Diop to the stage. He's going to moderate. Ambassador Diop is going to introduce a person who's not only a distinguished African, but who's hosted Tana. So I don't know, Excellency, whether you know, when you play in English football, you can be a player, then a manager, and a shareholder. I assume that in this particular instance, we will ascribe. So His Excellency Ali Mariam Desalegn, who's the former Prime Minister of the Federal Republic of Ethiopia, is going to join us on the stage. He will be properly introduced. I will return for a robust discussion when the moderator is done. Let me just check for online presence. Dr. Stephen Karinji, please confirm presence.
Good afternoon, everyone, and Excellencies. Yes, I am present.
Thank you, sir. Welcome. His Excellency Vincent Biruta, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Rwanda, kindly confirm presence. As I think, Excellency, so you can come to the stage. I think we'll do the introductions when you are on stage. I started deliberately a few minutes early so that I could just remind those who are joining us for the first time today of 4 key messages that came from yesterday. And indeed from the last 3 days. The first key message is that Africa can, Africa will, and Africa should. The second key message is that the context of COVID creates an opportunity for Africa to build forward differently. So in the speech by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, the idea was not necessarily building back better. I think that the speech suggested that the reason why we're in the crisis we're in is because how we were building before would not suffice to take us into a post-COVID future. So he suggested that we need to be building forward differently by including young people, by guaranteeing freedom of movement for Africans, and by investing in African entrepreneurs and SMEs. The third message that came out from the last 3 days is that a comprehensive approach to economic and social policy, and therefore the AFCFTA, was important because it would enable us to view peace and security, economic development or transformation, as well as the social well-being for Africans as part of the same continuum. The third message that came out, Excellency, was that to imagine Pan-Africanism in the context that we are in is also to imagine how to unleash the full potential of not only all African institutions, but their ability to collaborate, to co-create, and to coordinate. The last message that came from the last 3 days was that the youth of Africa cannot become a demographic dividend unless we invest in them. And that means investing in those things that equip them with skills, to be able to exploit opportunities created by the AFCFTA. There were many other things said, Your Excellencies, but since this is a high-level debate that's going to deepen on those and other themes, I'd like to hand over to His Excellency Ambassador Pelayo, who's the Chief of Staff of the African Union Commission and the moderator of the high-level panel. Ambassador, hand over to you.
Thank you, Brian. Good afternoon, everyone. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks to the Tana Forum for giving me this opportunity to moderate such a high-level and distinguished panel. It gives me also a great pleasure to moderate this panel, which is focused on the continental free trade area, revitalizing Pan-Africanism and integration. The idea of the single market, specifically an African economic community, is not a novelty. It is linked to Pan-Africanism itself. This has been one of the first projects that our leader put forward at the creation of the OAU in 1963. As such, the entry into force of the CFTA in 2018 was historical, opening a new development vista for our continent. Today, 54 countries have signed the agreement and 28 countries have deposited the instrument of ratification with the African Union Commission. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement aims to create a single market of 1.2 billion consumers with an aggregate GDP between 2.1 to 3.4 trillion US dollars. If implemented fully, the trade pact would boost the regional income by 7% or 450 billion, speed up wage growth for women, and lift 30 million people out of extreme poverty by 2030. We hope the majority of them will be young people. You know that Africa youth population is expected to double and to reach by 2050 approximately 830 million people. Achieving these gains will be particularly important given the economic damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is expected to cause Africa about 80 billion in output losses only in 2020. The main idea of the CFTA is to allow people and goods to move freely across the continent. Allow me to insist on the element of the free movement of people, because CFTA is not only a project to establish a common market or to promote economic liberalism. It's also part of the Pan-African vision to create a political and economic space where we can feel like if we were in a single country. But today we are in a paradox. While the CFTA have been signed and ratified by a significant number of countries, unfortunately, the free trade movement protocol has only been signed by 32 countries and ratified, only by 4 countries, namely Cape Verde, Mali, Niger, and Rwanda, which is a source of concern for all of us because we know CFTA cannot be effective if we don't have also linked to it adequately the free movement of people. So the relationship between the implementation of the free trade area and insecurity is also inverse. More insecurity jeopardizes the implementation of the CFTA, while a successful trade will improve peace and security. The FCFTA is therefore not just a wealth creation initiative, but also arguably Africa's most significant move toward meeting peace and security aspiration of the Agenda 2063. So the challenge, as Brian alluded to yesterday, is how can we reconcile competition on one hand and solidarity and unity on the other hand? That's one thing. And also, how we can promote the economic development of the continent driven by CFTA and inequality. That is also at the root cause of many instabilities in our continent. Against this background, I would like to suggest several questions to our distinguished panel, which you all know fundamentally does not need to be introduced, but I will just introduce His Excellency Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, who has held also a significant position in the Ethiopian government. More importantly also, Prime Minister Desalegn was chairing the African Union during the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the Union, and where also this initiative of silencing the gun was adopted. So we will be really privileged to benefit from his wisdom as he has been acting at this highest level of the continent to share with us his view. Our second participant, speaker, is the Honorable Vincent Biruta. I hope he had the chance to join this panel. Vincent Biruta is the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Republic of Rwanda. Prior to this appointment, Minister Biruta had been Minister of Natural Resources, Minister of Communication, Minister of Education, Minister of Health, and also President of the Rwandan Senate. Our last speaker is Stephen Kariji. Stephen Kariji is currently the Director of the Regional Integration and Trade Division with the Economic Commission of Africa, UNECA, the division which is in charge of supporting and implementing the ACFTA. He has written extensively with many newspapers as well as participated in the work of many think tanks. So this is the panel that we have with us today, and I think we'll have a good participation, good insight from our panelists. Let me turn to Prime Minister Desalegn for my first question. Prime Minister, as I said, you were at the helm of Africa when many of these initiatives have been taken, especially silencing the gun, but also the economic recovery plans of Africa. Can you share with us your views? What, in your view, what are the conditions and the prerequisites that we need for accelerated implementation of the CFTA? And what is the specific role of the leaders?
First of all, thank you very much, Ambassador Rio. It is a distinct privilege, and I'm very much happy to be amongst you today to take part in this very important and challenging topic that the Tana Forum has organized. You know, as Tana Forum is a premier and a flagship forum that works on the security of our continent. I think we need to discuss at this high moment the relationship between African Continental Free Trade Agreement and its relations to peace and security. First of all, I feel that this is a landmark decision made by our leaders and the African Union Assembly in 2018. Even though it's far-reaching and we are a little bit delayed in the decision process, but nevertheless it is the most important decision that has been taken in the history of the African Union, next to the formation of the Organization of African Unity and later on African Union. One of the discussions in the formation of the African Union was to establish African Continental Free Trade Areas. I remember that has been at the top of this agenda, but still, again, since the formation of the African Union, we have taken something like 10 more than 10 years to have to discuss it and decide on the African Continental Free Trade Area. But let me say, I mean, I am not Afro-optimist or neither Afro-pessimist. I want to be Afro-realist. Because, you know, we have been talking about African integration since its formation of the Organization of African Unity, but it has taken so long so far. Africa still remains balkanized and fragmented. So we need to see to the decision be implemented. Again, what I see is there is a need for aggressive and proactive leadership as far as the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area is concerned. The ideas of Pan-Africanism and the vision of African Renaissance has been there for the last, 50 or so years. But the implementation has lagged behind. And I have a concern that if we continue business as usual, maybe this decision, the landmark decision, can also be delayed for so long. So it needs leadership. When I say leadership, it's not only political leadership, but I also call upon business leaders, civil society leaders, intellectual community, as well as religious leaders and leaders in Africa, with African tradition, to come along in the process of implementation of this very important decision. So I think leadership is the most crucial thing. I can cite some of the examples where the African Union has decided during its formation decisions like the new Partnership for African Development, NEPAD, and its programs like, Comprehensive African Agricultural Program, Agricultural Development Program. We have also other programs, again, like, program for African Infrastructure Development, Tana. So these are the very important programs that the African Union has designed. And I think that these are very important decisions that are enablers for the African Continental Free Trade Area to be implemented. But if you see the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program, we were able to evaluate after 10 years of its decision. And we all see that many African countries are lagging behind the implementation of this program. If we continue with this kind of trend, and after 10 years we come back and say, where is the African Continental Free Trade Area? And similarly, if you look into the program for infrastructure development in Africa, and then until now, we haven't implemented a single African infrastructure integration project implemented. So I think there is a risk if there is no leadership that this is going to be implemented as we wish it to be. Of course, there is an encouraging trend where the ratification, after signing this agreement, the ratification has been quickly done, and 28 countries have ratified, and so it has come into action. But my worry and my concern is that if we do not have proper leadership, I think it will take us some years to implement this lofty continental vision and program. So leadership is the most important thing. To me, I think there is a colonial legacy. We were trading with outsiders and Africans. Because if you remember right, all the infrastructure built in Africa were built to the ports that need our goods and services to be traded with Europeans and some other countries, not within Africa. So, and that calls for us to go for an aggressive infrastructure development both physical and electronic infrastructure or digital infrastructure that helps to expedite the process of implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. So leadership is the most critical in this regard, and I think I taking this opportunity, I call upon all my colleagues, leaders of Africa, to come up with an aggressive view and action to implement this program.
Thanks a lot, Your Excellency. You said it, leadership matters. What matters is a collective leadership across the board, from the top leadership up to civil society, academia, private sector, all sorts of works. And also, you highlighted the need of the implementation, because we Africans, we are very quick in adopting decision, making a resolution, but the key is implementation. With implementation goes also the credibility. Because when we make decisions and they are not implemented, it creates a gap between leaders and the community. So implementation is key. We need to have those strategies. You pull out the issue also of the physical connectivity of the continent, and which is also something very important, not only to be connected with outside Africa through the colonial routes, but we have to make sure that physically, Cairo, you highlighted the need of the implementation, because we Africans, we are very quick in adopting decision, making a resolution, but the key is implementation. With implementation goes also the credibility, because when we make decisions and they are not implemented, it creates a gap between leaders and the community. So implementation is key. We need to have those strategies. You pull out the issue also of the physical connectivity of the continent, and which is also something very important, not only to be connected with outside Africa through the colonial routes, but we have to make sure that physically Cairo is connected to South Africa and Addis is connected to Dakar. So thank you for sharing that with us. I want to welcome Minister Vincent Biruta, the Foreign Minister of Rwanda. I think he just joined us. Minister Biruta, what you may not know also, is a physician. He has been Minister of Health. I will want him also to help us to reflect on the link between CFTA and the COVID era. Currently, we know that the COVID has exposed most of the fragility and the vulnerability of Africa. We realize that all the things that we need, from the equipment to the medical supply to respond to the pandemic, including masks, are not made in Africa. They are made outside of Africa. Minister, how do you think that CFTA can be an opportunity for local development, to promote local production, to promote the industrialization of the continent? And you specifically in Rwanda, what are the specific steps that you intend to take to make the CFTA a reality in this post-COVID era? Minister Biruta, you have the floor.
Thank you, moderator, and sorry for being a little bit late, and technology has failed us and you have missed the first part of this conversation. But let me just say that this year 2020 was supposed to be a milestone for our continent, with trading under the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement scheduled to start on July 1st, 2020. Instead, we are now dealing with the crippling effects of the pandemic. Yet, this pandemic has shown us that self-sustainability matters, and it is important mostly for food security, education, healthcare, logistical services, and so on. One of the objectives of the CFTA is to make the continent self-reliant in these various sectors. And as we move forward, we need to develop a framework with realistic implementation plans to improve self-sustainability in these key sectors, including the ones you mentioned, for the manufacturing of these supplies we needed to deal with COVID-19. And actually, in some of African countries, this pandemic has shown that you have some capacity actually to manufacture some of these items, at least for items like masks. Even here in Rwanda, we are manufacturing them. But what we need to do is just to build on this momentum and make sure that we understand that the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is an important tool for this continent to be able to self-sustain itself and to be able to trade with the rest of the world as a continent. COVID-19 demonstrated the importance actually of implementing this agreement, and the current momentum needs to be maintained as a mechanism for building resilience and managing long-term volatility. A well-implemented CFTA would go a long way in reducing Africa's reliance on donor funds and external aid in a global and continental recession. There is indeed an urgent need to reduce the continent's high trade dependence on non-African partners. And as we have seen during this pandemic, even this dependence has not helped very much, because at some point, you remember, some of these items were not even accessible for most of us, most of our countries, even when you had money to pay for it. Everybody was struggling to get the test kits, to get a mask, to get various items, and it was at some point very difficult to get those supplies. So maximizing the potentials of these CFTA will be an effective shock absorber in the if the global economy remains depressed by the pandemic and its uncertainty. We need really to understand that this pandemic, even if it has delayed the implementation of the CFTA, it needs to let us understand that we need it urgently. We need to implement it to build our self-reliance and to be able to compete on the global stage. And we need also to understand that we need to build our capacity on the African continent to be able to face future pandemics or other disasters which will be coming in the future. So the pandemic has delayed the implementation of CFTA, but it is also an opportunity for us really to understand the importance of this tool and to build on that momentum, fast track the implementation of the CFTA, and keep monitoring it so that we can deliver the result we are expecting from it. Thank you.
Lord Minister Biruta, for this insightful comments. You said it rightly, CFTA is a wake-up call for all of us. It will not be the last pandemic to hit us. It recalls us of the need to build this, reliance and self-reliance. It also reminds us of the urgency of even to speed up the implementation of the CFTA. Thank you for that, Minister. Let me at this point to turn also to our friend Dr. Karingi from the CFTA, from the Economic Commission for Africa, where he is the Director of Regional Integration. Dr. Karingi, can you help us just to understand to what extent do you think the free trade area can promote the prosperity among the African countries, African economies, which are mostly extrovert economy? It means that these are not complementary economies. They are all mostly producing goods for exports, mineral for exports. So how do you think the CFTA can then help to create prosperity in Africa in that particular context, in this post-colonial legacy that we have? Dr. Karingi, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador Diop. Let me acknowledge His Excellency, former Prime Minister Desalegn, and also the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Rwanda, and also all the other ministers and leaders and participants with us. Before I answer that question, Ambassador, I wanted to start by saying that actually the AFCFTA is rooted in the core principles of Pan-Africanism, because we are trying to look at how the AFCFTA could actually foster Pan-Africanism. And it is my thesis, and for those who have actually been working so hard on the AFCFTA, that the AFCFTA is itself rooted on the core principles of Pan-Africanism. Now, so if I was to come to the question that you have asked, I have listened to the former Prime Minister. He did actually talk about the economic implications of the AFCFTA. But just to give an idea of what the work of the Economic Commission for Africa has shown, and work that has actually been quite convincing when it comes to engaging the negotiators on the benefits of the AFCFTA. If today you were to implement the agreement on the protocol of trading goods alone, and you also deal with the connectivity question as highlighted by the Prime Minister, the former Prime Minister, by 2040, if we have done all this, we would actually be able to add close to $70 billion every year in terms of additional intra-African trade. Now, this is significant because more than $40 billion of that is additional every year, would actually be in value added goods. So the Minister for Rwanda has actually mentioned that at the start of the pandemic, or at the height of the pandemic, the global supply chains locked up, and it was even very difficult for Africa to get supplies for pharmaceuticals and medical supplies. But what we have seen is that through the African Medical Supplies Platform, that the African Union has actually been at the lead in terms of putting it together, we have actually seen a good number of the suppliers to that platform are actually African manufacturers who are actually able to repurpose their factories and to keep their industries running. So if you take it that the numbers show that more than 2/3 of the additional intra-African trade would actually be in value added. And then if you add the fact that COVID-19 has actually demonstrated to us that we do actually have that capacity, then it is clearly a case, or at least there is evidence or the proof of the concept that the AFCFTA will actually deliver on trade. Now, why is this issue of trade? This issue of trade is important for Africa because when it comes to financing development, a lot of us talk about aid. We also talk about FDI. We have lately been talking about remittances, but the earnings that Africa gets from trade is actually more than $500 billion every year. Now, this is more than remittances, FDI, and aid all added together. So if you were to think in terms of financing our economies, the AFCFTA is actually offering us an opportunity to at least be able to help our private sector keep going and actually recover from the pandemic that we have seen. So I would want to argue that the AFCFTA, when it comes to not only delivering on the benefits, economic benefits in terms of manufacturing, high quality jobs, it will also allow the African governments, or at least the African people, to be able to finance their development. Now, if you allow me, because we are talking about Pan-Africanism, and I'll take only 2 minutes on this. I think as an African citizen, someone who is not sitting in the same level as the former Prime Minister or the Minister, I think the AFCFTA will only have meaning if we start thinking in terms of the people. Pan-Africanism should not be about the states. it should be about the African people. And I think because we said we want to talk honestly and freely under this Tana forum, I would want to argue that when we think of the new Pan-Africanism, we need to start thinking about the African people. You have mentioned that you would want to see the youth benefit from the AFCFTA. We have said that we want to see the women benefit from the AFCFTA. Now, they cannot be able to benefit from that if we continue allowing sort of national interests when it comes to the conversations about the AFCFTA to drive the actions that we want to take as governments in terms of finalizing the tariff offers, the rules of origin. So we need to start thinking about the people more closely, and that's the only way we can actually ensure that the spirit of Pan-Africanism becomes entrenched even in our young people who do not actually have these colonial hangovers or the colonial history hangover, and they just want to see themselves as Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Very good points. First, CFTA is an opportunity to see Africa beyond aid, to help us to promote, to finance our own development. 500 billion opportunity to raise resources for the continent versus more or less about 50 billion that we are getting for development assistance today. Second, Pan-Africanism is mostly about people. I think that's lesson. We should keep that one. Let me turn again to you, Your Excellency, former Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. I was recalling that you were at the helm of the continent as the leaders were devising to establish this new vision of the silencing the gun. Today you are here with all the experience that you have gained in and outside of the government. How do you think the CFTA can provide an added benefit to peace and security and ultimately to the realization of the vision of silencing the gun?
Thank you very much, Ambassador, again. I think, first of all, people raise guns simply because they feel that they are marginalized in terms of economic opportunity, as well as equitable distribution of wealth of the country. And so if that's the case, then we should have, a shared, equitable, and an inclusive economic growth and development in Africa. And each and every country should, ascertain that people get, the equal benefits from the wealth that's created in that country. Marginalization in many cases, it could be an ethnic group or a certain portion of society or a section of society like the youth and women. These are the ones usually resent by our performance in the African context, and that creates lots of conflict. And I think this is the main reason why African Continental Free Trade Area can contribute to minimize, this conflict or somehow resolve this conflict by addressing the real quest of the people. As my colleague said, the African Continental Free Trade Area and Pan-Africanism at large is of the people. It's not of the political elites or business elites or whatever. So if that's the case, then an inclusive, shared, and equitable growth is important. The second issue is, if you look into the African economic growth narrative, most of the African countries are growing very slowly, and that do not address the real quest of the people. So we need an accelerated, robust economic growth. And if that's the case, then African Continental Free Trade Area contributes to this very enormously. And we have to harness this potential at our disposal at this moment. But when you look into the global context, now at this time, the the African Continental Free Trade Area has come at a real phase where the international community, especially the big players, are going for protectionism and marginalizing African continent because they are, working for preferential trade regimes like the Chinese or the European Union or United States or Canada. They go for some regional or continental trade agreements than the global WTO regime that works for all of us. So Africa is marginalized at this moment. If you continue on marginalization in the African continent, then it will not be easy for Africa to develop very fast and robust economic growth. So we need this continental free trade area to silence the guns because after all, we are here to fight poverty. And if you don't address the real cause of poverty, then I think you can't silence guns at this time. So it's intertwined, and you cannot separately see peace and security without looking into robust economic growth and social transformation. So I think this is very, very essential. If I need to give some examples, look what Boko Haram is doing in Nigeria. Why it is in the northern Nigeria that Boko Haram has become so aggressive. If you look into the educational performance in the northern Nigeria, you will see that it is much more below the national average in Nigeria. And if you look into the economic opportunities of these marginalized societies, especially the pastoral community, then it obviously you can see why Boko Haram has been breeding in the northern part of Nigeria. And you can look into similarly Al-Shabaab in Somalia. But you go down to each country, and when you see communal violence and conflict, in most cases, areas where there is marginalization are more prone to conflict and lack of peace and security, and they go for AK-14. So the whole thing is we need to address this issue outright through integrating our African economy. United, we will prosper. Divided, we will perish. So I think that's the ideal of Pan-Africanism, and we need to integrate our economy as quickly as possible. But again, I want to capitalize on the point that if our leadership is not taking this seriously, Africa will continue to be marginalized. Africa will not play its role in the global economy and the global setting. And we can only play this by having economy of scale and compete with other global continental bodies. So we need to integrate very quickly and aggressively work towards that. So I think silencing the gun is possible, but each and every individual country should go hand in hand, We have to share best practices in West Africa to East Africa or to Southern Africa. So I think this needs a governance system and an institutional setup that helps to address the issue in depth.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We need societies and countries which are well governed. We need a more inclusive society, country, and government. But the response to CFTA and to peace and security also remain once again Pan-Africanism and integration. Let me now at this point turn again to Minister Biruta in Rwanda. At the beginning of my statement, I was bringing some figure that by 2050, Africa will have the youth population of about 830 million. And probably projection can go even higher. We said Pan-Africanism is about citizens, and the young people is at the heart of the project everywhere. And we know the youth unemployment is a big concern around the continent. It's a major issue in Rwanda as well. We know that Africa today, the formal economy in Africa, is only able to generate 3 million jobs per annum. And we know that the labor market is receiving every year 10 to 12 million people. So how do you think, Minister, that using the CFTA and all the economic tools that we have, what are the best strategies that we, government, civil society, and other actors, including private sector, can put in place to create a generated development which can help us to absorb these young people? Because responding to the needs of our young people is not only an economic imperative, it's also a national and regional security for all of us. Either we use these young people as an opportunity, we invest in them, or they become a threat to any of us, and then we are sitting on a time bomb. So how do you think we can respond to this challenge using the CFTA to provide job and opportunity to our young people? Minister Biruta.
Thank you. You have already said it. For me, CFTA is about economic opportunities. It's about job creation. It is about wealth creation, actually. And we need to make sure it is inclusive. And we need to make sure that that youth you were talking about is equipped with the right skills to be able to be integrated in the economy and to be actually the engine of that economy we're talking about. So youth employment is key. But for the youth to be really integrated in the economy, it needs to be educated. The youth need to have the right skills so that they can drive or that transformation we are looking at. The youth today we are talking about, when we refer to this instability in some parts of Africa, that youth is utilized because those young people don't have the right skills. They are not integrated in the economy. They don't see the future. And while we talk about trade, intra-African trade, while we talk about the trade between Africa and the other continents, we need to make sure that the journey is really inclusive. And we need to build on the young people of this continent to make sure that those will be actually the one to lead the transformation. And investing in education is key. And when I talk about education, I'm not necessarily meaning university education, or that is very important, but there are other very many sectors on this continent where we need skills and that we need to develop. And we, at the same time, we create opportunities for these young people to be integrated in the economy. And here I'm referring to the technical and vocational training. Our economies need carpenters, our economy need mechanical experts. We need all these people are needed in our continent. And if we invest properly, we'll be able to absorb that youth in the transformation journey. Otherwise, planning any development of this continent without really considering the youth and the women, it is a waste of resources in the first place. And whatever we'll be doing will not be sustainable if we don't integrate the youth and the women. And we need to look at the youth not as really an impediment or whatever. The youth is the solution. It is the solution, but we need to make sure that we invest properly in that youth to equip it with the right skills or with the right knowledge, so that tomorrow and after tomorrow they are actually the one to lead the continent and to drive that transformation we're talking about. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Minister Biruta. We have to manage also the time. I will just ask my last question to Stephen, and then I'm receiving many contribution and question from participants online. I will also give an opportunity also, since they are outside of this room, for an opportunity for the questions to be answered, as well as we'll pass also to the participant in the room. So Steve, my last question for you is the following. Stephen, I know you have done a lot of work on the implementation of the CFTA. As I said previously, we are in the paradox. While we are expediting the implementation of the CFTA, we realize that the protocol on the free movement is only ratified by 4 countries. Congratulations to Minister Biruta, who is among Rwanda, which is among the 4 countries who has ratified this protocol, which is very important development. We hope that by the next summit or beyond, we'll have many countries. So, Steve, my question to you is the following. How can we effectively implement the CFTA when the protocol on free movement is not implemented and is very far from being implemented? So, and what would be the strategies to ensure that we are embarking not only in the free market, but how can we ensure that African talent, African people can also be in the position to move? As I said, also our Pan-African vision is also to allow Africans to marry, to know each other, to share our cultural heritage. So what is the strategies for us to ensure that we are not only establishing a free trade area for goods, but also we are establishing a free movement of people to make it a reality, that our young people don't have to risk their life in the Mediterranean Ocean for opportunity, while we think this Eldorado is definitely on the continent, but maybe we don't see it. Still, this.
Thanks, Ambassador. That's a great question. I would like to, first of all, ask, why is it that countries are not ratifying this protocol on the free movement of people? Why is it that countries, if you look at the African Development Bank Visa Openness Index, it's just a few countries that allow Africans to be able to come to their countries without the need of visa. Yes, it's true, there has been an improvement when it comes to the visa openness. But why is it that that is the case? And I think it goes back to the first question. I mean, to the question that the Prime Minister was responding. A security dimension and peace and security question. So my view, at least from a technical point of view, and also sometimes listening to the commentators within the continent, is that the lack of speed in terms of ratifying the free movement of people protocol, it has to do with the issues of security and or rather peace and security. But then here we are talking about the AFCFTA, and the Prime Minister has actually argued clearly that the AFCFTA could actually be an enabler of peace and security. And then I will go ahead and add that stakes become very high when you are trading with your neighbor. Stakes become very high. If there is a conflict between 2 countries that are in your market, or maybe between 2 countries or in a region where you source your intermediate inputs. So in other words, what I'm trying to say in short is that I think the AFCFTA is critical to the realization of peace and security, or at least, and also peace and security is critical to the success of the AFCFTA. And now to come to the question about the free movement of people, I think we have seen from those countries that have allowed applicants to go to the countries without the requirement or the need for visa. And I think the Minister for Rwanda is here. I don't think one could say that there was a spike of insecurity be whatever kind of security, because you allow people to come to your country. So I think countries need to ratify the Free Movement of Persons Protocol, because it is people who trade, it is people who provide services. We don't want a situation whereby we are talking of the AFCFTA and then we make it impossible or difficult for people to conduct cross-border trade, be it through trucks or even through air or whatever logistics means they have, because you have to hold them at the border, because you're considering them. But because there is no free movement of persons. Now, again, if you go back to the origins of Pan-Africanism, the idea, and I can tell you because I work at an institution which was established in 1958, actually before the Organization of African Unity, and I have looked at some of the ministerial discussions that were happening in the early days of the ECA. And in those early days of the ECA, when the ministers used to meet, they would talk about economic integration, they would talk about people, African people being able to move across the continent. So it's sad that we are here talking about the AFCFTA. We have the single African air transport market. We also have the Free Movement of Persons Protocol. These three are supposed to work together. They're supposed to go together if they're going to optimize the AFCFTA. And by the way, we do not have time. We do not have time. You mentioned about at the start of your intervention that there are jobs that are going to be created if we fully implement the AFCFTA. You mentioned that I think more than 100 jobs. But there are very many jobs that are actually being lost because of COVID-19. So unless we decide that we will use digitalization, we are going to implement the Malabo Convention on cyber security so that at least we remove these fears that we have about inability to track people when they move from one country to another. We need to at least use all these frameworks of the African Union for us to overcome the fears of the free movement of African. Now, digital identity is actually one of those strategies that actually Africa used at the beginning of this year. Our leaders endorsed the digital transformation strategy, and one of the pillars of the digital transformation strategy is actually being able to cover issues of digital identity, so that when Mr. Karim lives in Addis Ababa and he enters Sudan, you can also be able to see that he did not think back to all international airport, but he directly to Abuja and digital identity will allow this power. If you don't want to increase the cost of our traders, you can reduce that cost by actually have the free movement of people and also use leveraging on digitalization and digital identities and other things that deal with issues of privacy and security to facilitate the movement of our business persons. So I think that is what we need to do, and I think we need to overcome this fear of allowing people to cross borders, because we have empirical evidence that there was no spike or increase in terms of crime or insecurity in Rwanda when they opened up. And I think even here in Ethiopia now, a lot of Africans are able to come and get their visa at the airport. I don't think there has been a spike of insecurity arising from the rest of the continent because Africans can come easily into Ethiopia. So that's what I would say. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stephen, for that. I think this is very important. Me, I'm also from Mali. I can testify that these terrorist groups move between the countries. They don't need visa, they don't need passport. And if I can also give an example, Rwanda and even Ethiopia today are among the most open African countries for Africans to visit their country. Yet, they are still very attached to their own security. So free movement does not mean that you open your border to everybody, there is no control. It's even an opportunity through the digital identity to even build a database where we can provide more security to our people. That's very important that we also try to understand why countries are not ratifying. Maybe it's about a myth, about a phobia, but we need also to provide them with really data, information, analysis, so we can move along those lines. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let us take 10 minutes to respond to the question that we received from our online participant, and then we'll take 10 minutes or so to take some questions from the floor. I will try to assign some of the questions to maybe some of the participants. Maybe some of them can also decide which question they think they are more qualified to respond. I received the question 1 from Daniel Wambonu, who asked this: ACFTA need a single currency and an African national ID to facilitate free movement of people and goods. Which measure are African countries taking to implement this? First question. Second is from Solomon Bele. How are African traditional and community local structure and ideologies featured in the CFTA? Should we still copy the West? Why are we relying only on leaders in the realization of the free trade? What about civil society and communities? So maybe Steve can take the first question. I may ask Prime Minister Desalegn or Minister Biruta to respond to the second question about the communities and the role of the leaders, even though we touched briefly on that element already. I have a question from Desiree Axobavi. Could Africa CFTA has its way if guns are still talking in Africa? Don't we need to silence the guns so people can move and trade safely? Anonymous participant asked also, in any trade agreement there are winners and losers. How will it be managed? African economies and SMEs need to be strengthened to become globally competitive. How should or can this be done? Second question, freedom of movement should be linked to the right to trade and right of residence and labor migration. How will this win? I'm not sure it's a win given the growing xenophobia and tightening of migration laws. Last one, how will equality and standards be dealt with? Will there be standardization of regional or continental level? How will obligation under the CFTA be harmonized with the EPA, which are the Economic Partnership Agreement between EU and some African countries, EPAs, bilateral agreements such as Kenya, and US deal. So I would just repeat, how will obligation under CFTA be harmonized with EPAs and bilateral agreements such as Kenya-US deals? Prime Minister, please take on some of the questions, and then I will turn to Minister Biruta and to Stephen Karenji to respond to whatever question you think is more relevant to your experience. Please, Prime Minister.
Okay, Ambassador, thank you. I think maybe the question you raised earlier is also goes hands with what the participants are raising. The first thing is African countries are afraid of free people's movement simply because almost all of them are not producing enough and integrating their economy within themselves domestically. So they think that those outsiders coming in will compete for jobs and job security of the citizens within the boundary of that country. So I think that's the main reason why they are not allowing free movement of people. There are good examples like my countrymen and women are traveling to Southern Africa, and that has resulted into xenophobia, we all know. And most of them are working very hard and somehow competing with citizens, and especially at the lower ladder of the job structure. And I think that has created some animosity. So the thing is, if people are afraid at this time of outsiders coming into their country, I think it is realistic. what I expect from African Continental Free Trade Area is that it will create more opportunities within countries so that everyone will be, content enough that they can accommodate those who are coming in. And I think we have to expand our economies and expand jobs within the countries. And you need skills. If you take now the Gulf countries, they need more jobs, especially low-ranking jobs, as I said, housemaids and even some skills, and a number of countries are supplying those jobs. Filipinos are the main, employed persons in Gulf countries. Indians, Pakistanis, and others also from Asia you find them. If the population of some of the countries are only 2 million, but the outsiders are 16 million or so. So I think the whole thing is bringing up economic opportunities within domestic sphere. Then you can bring more jobs and more free movement of people into the African economy. I think some people say you have to silence guns before bringing the integration. That's not true, because you can't do it. What you can do is start with what you have. It's not an egg and chicken kind of an issue. You have to start with what you have, and through course you reduce the security threat and also bring economic opportunity. It is just something which is so much intertwined, and you cannot separate, make the security first and then bring economic development next. That doesn't work. So we have to start with what we have and continue on, improving our situations, and then you can have, both addressed at the same time. So you have to kill two birds with one stone, and I think this is very essential.
Thanks a lot, Prime Minister. Before I give the floor to Minister Biruta to take on some of the questions raised, many of them also could be from technical nature. We can ask Stephen from ECA to take on them. Before that, I just received a question before I give the floor to Minister Biruta, which I think has been already answered by Stephen, but I will just read it. It's coming from Professor Habele Matlosa, who asked the question directly to the Minister Biruta of Rwanda. As the continent officially begins implementation of the CFTA on January 1st, 2021, what are the prospects of success without free movement of people in the spirit of Pan-Africanism? I think that question was answered, but Minister, please, may you take the floor to address some of these issues raised by online participants.
Thank you. Let me first of all agree with the Prime Minister that we don't need to wait for guns to be silenced and start trading or deal with economic integration. We need to do both. We need to deal with security threats. We need to deal with wars, stability. But at the same time, we need to build the economy and to start trading in the continent. Eventually, one will help to address the other. So we do not start starting with something and later on go to the other one. It's about dealing with both of them at the same time, and we'll be able to achieve both, because both are very important. There was a question about winners and losers. I think here we have talked about inclusiveness. We should not be looking at that safety or that economic integration or intra-African trade as an argument which will make some winners and some losers. I think those who are going to be the losers are the ones who are not going to take the right decision to go for integration and start implementing the agreement and benefit from the opportunities which are being created by such an agreement. Otherwise, we should not look at just in terms of winners and losers. There was a question on single currency and national African ID. We need to start somewhere. Those are steps which can be reached at a later stage, but we should not start immediately with all this. It is a journey, a national area. We need to build these blocks, and step by step, eventually we'll be able to reach that level of integration, which was referred to by one of participants. In January 2021, we launched the CFTA, and there is the issue of the free movement of people, which is not a reality on the continent. Of course, it would be much, much better if free movement of people was a reality on the continent before we start implementation of the CFTA. But let's hope that those countries which have not ratified the instrument on free movement of people, we do it. Because eventually they wait to learn from those who did it before. But here I can assure you that there is no problem. One day anyone can come and get his visa on arrival. We have not seen any rising of criminality or whatever. So it is possible. And something else I wanted to comment on is that free movement of people doesn't mean the freedom of anyone to be established wherever he wants. It's about going to some place, doing business, leave it, go back home and move to a different place. We should not confuse it as free migration movements. So those who are afraid of these free movement of people, maybe they think that people are going to come to the place and establish themselves and start taking the jobs of the nationals and so on and so forth. This free movement of people goes also with rules. One day you come, you get a visa of 30 days, and after that 30 days you need to leave or to apply for another type of visa. But there are rules even for free movement of people. There are rules in place which need to be respected. So I think that what I want to say on these questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Minister. Before I turn to Stephen to take on some of these questions which have some technical nature, let me turn to Prime Minister Desalegn, who would probably address the issue of Africanizing the community engagement. Please, Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, again. I think we have to adapt to the African context, but we cannot say that we cannot learn from the best practices globally. I think trade and economic integration is not a new theory, and we shouldn't reinvent the wheel, and we have to learn from the best performances of the global community and then adapt to our African conditions and use them and get the benefit out of it. So the whole issue is, yes, Africa has its own traditions, and most of the African tradings are informal, but we have to formalize them. But again, we need to involve the civil society groups. As I mentioned earlier, we shouldn't leave this thing only to political elites and business elites or academia, but we have to involve community and make the community at the center of our engagements in continental free trade area and agreement implementation. So the whole thing is we have a lot to learn from other continents, but we have to also adapt and use our own mechanisms to involve and make our people at the center of it. So as I'm mentioning, that my colleague has said, it's all about people. It's not just about business people only. So this is how we can do. But what is that? We have to sit down and work out. The implementation needs the engagement of the entire African people.
Thanks a lot, Prime Minister. This is a great reminder. How can we make sure the African people are really part of the integration process? This is an important element. Steve, we have a few questions that you may need to come to help us. One of the questions is about African economies, and the SMEs need to be strengthened to be globally competitive. How this can be done? Second, how will equality and standards be dealt with? Will there be standardization at the regional and continental level? Last question, how will CFTA, how will obligation and the CFTA be harmonized with the EPAs, the Economic Partnership Agreements, and the bilateral agreement like US, Canada? Please.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can still hear me. Can you hear me?
That's correct. Yes, please. Proceed.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, very quickly, on the question about the single currency, you don't need a single currency for the AfCFTA to be successful. What we need here is to focus on, we have payment systems at the sub-regional level. We need interoperability of these payment systems in the interim, even as we work towards a Pan-African payment system that will allow us to trade in our own currency and just have a clearing house for the trade at the end of the day. And I think Africa is showing leadership in terms of financial technology, and I think we are way ahead to make this possible. On the question about quality and standards, fortunately, the protocol on trading goods, it actually has very good elements. It has an annex that deals with issues of standards. And we also have the Pan-African institution that deals with that deals with standardization, that is ARSO. So the AfCFTA is coming into a platform where Africa has already been working on the issue of standardization. And it is not the first time that Africa has engaged with issues of standards in the context of trade, because what the CFTA did, it did not reinvent the wheel when it came to issues of sanitary and phytosanitary standards or even TBTs. These are things that Africa has actually been engaging with at the multilateral level. And so in the question of standardization, the CFTA deals with this issue very well. Maybe what we need to do is actually to upgrade our infrastructure. On the question of the EPAs and other FTAs and the AfCFTA, let me be honest. If we want to deepen the continental integration, and if we want to ensure that the AfCFTA delivers on the manufacturing capacity that this continent has, then we need to prioritize the realization of the AfCFTA and create a large platform that African countries can actually now be able to engage with the rest of the world. Now, if you look at the incoherence that the economic partnership agreements have brought, it means that African countries in the different economic partnership agreements configurations may not be at an optimal point whereby they make full utilization of the AfCFTA. So we need harmony when it comes to the other agreements that African countries have with the rest of the world. But at the end of the day, in terms of sequencing, AfCFTA should come first. And even when it comes to the negotiations between Kenya and the US and any other country that may decide to do so, the AfCFTA agreement does not say you shouldn't do that. But at least what it does say is that do not undermine the AFCFTA, because we know the AFCFTA is meant to be for the benefit of the Africans. So we do not want to see a situation whereby future bilateral trade arrangements with the rest of the world actually make it difficult for the state parties or the African countries to optimize on the AFCFTA. So the question of sequence is very important. And then we also have to remember that the type of trade that we have within the continent is of much superiority when compared to the trade that you have with the rest of some of these other countries. And finally, because I know we are running out of time, on the question of the SMEs, 90% of the African private sector, 90% of the African economy is the private sector. 80% of that are SMEs. So at the end of the day, our initial position is that we are dealing with SMEs for us to have a successful AFCFTA. So what we need here is for the state parties of the AFCFTA to meet their commitments and the obligations under the AFCFTA. And because we want everybody, we don't want anybody to be left behind, we need to have a universal African Continental Free Trade Area that includes all the 55 member states of the African Union. And basically what this means is that we need to engage, like the Prime Minister has said, at all levels. Get the private sector involved, civil society involved, the youth involved. Do not just leave it to the big business in Africa and to the political leadership. So that's what I would say at this point. Because I know we are running out of time, I would have wanted to respond to the question of winners and losers, but I think the Minister and the Prime Minister did try to address that point.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I think to be just, I need also to turn to the floor. So we have also physical participants. We will just take few questions from the floor. I receive also another additional question online, but I will come back to that later. Please, gentlemen from close to the door, please, may you take the floor.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you very much for the great presentations. My name is Emmanuel Benza. I come from Ghana. After Policy Network, very happy to be here. Just want to refer you to the Assessing Regional Integration for Africa, the 9th edition, very important publication that has been useful in conversations around regional integration for a very long time. And the last year's edition, there was a particular quotation which was very important. It was about the after, not just being about intra-African trade, but about dispelling the crisis of implementation around AU programming and Agenda 2063, which is to say, for some of us, that what it therefore means is that if we could have moved so quickly on the African Continental Free Trade Area with the momentum that we have seen, then surely we must be able to move around all the other issues that we have seen around the AU levy, around freedom of movement protocol, and so on and so forth. Some of us, since we have been frank, and we are being encouraged to be frank, I would like to recommend that we need to get to the stage where we have in the lexicons the after momentum, where that can be replicated in the regional economic communities, because even this is an opportunity to rejig the regional economic communities, those that have not been performing on freedom of movement. SADC, for example, SADC has a freedom of movement protocol that has not really been applied in the way that ECOWAS and East African Community has been applied, and so on and so forth. There are many issues around that. Even IGAD, with some of its challenges, has been having conversations around freedom of movement, and so on and so forth. So 2021 is upon us, and 2021, I'd also like to remind us that 2021 is also the year when the implementation of AU reforms takes place. What impact will the AU reforms, whereby we see the political affairs, peace and security come to life, where the Department of Political Affairs is supposed to be collapsed, and therefore there's that combination. we will also see more of a conversation around the levy, because currently I think less than 10 countries are paying the 0.2% levy. Rwanda, Chad, Kenya, Ghana, so on and so forth. So that is one of the questions I'd like to put to the floor, that going forward, as we think through how relevant the African Continental Free Trade Area will be in changing our lives, how are we going to reconcile that also with the new reforms that are happening at the African Union Commission itself, for it to be leaner and so on and so forth? That has been consistent with the Kigali Declaration back in 2018. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I will just take one additional question, because I see Brian threatening me that if I don't stop next time, they will not call me to come to moderate any session at the Tana Forum. So just make sure I don't lose my opportunity. If it's a lady hand, definitely I will take it. Madam, please, on this table.
Thank you very much, and pleasure to be here. I am the new ambassador of Finland here, and definitely my first time at Tana Forum, enjoying it a lot. Of course, many of this, what I've heard today, reminds me of the debate and discussion that has been going on in Europe earlier and still going on. So we know it's a bumpy road to proceed in the integration, but at least from my own country's perspective, I can tell that we have profited a lot, both from the political and economic integration of Europe. But my question would be about how to get the Africans on board. You have mentioned many times how the idea is to engage the Africans, to engage the communities, the small businesses. So what kind of measures have the states taken to communicate about the treaty to people, to communities, and to small businesses?
Thanks a lot. I think these are also very, very important questions. I received two questions. I will just read them for this, because for the sake of inclusiveness, I'm not sure we have enough time to respond. If Brian allow me, we can discuss this maybe over the coffee. The first question is to all panelists. How do we ensure that Africans at the grassroots are engaging with and have a clear understanding of CFTA and free movement, and fully understand the structural changes and benefits both will bring about, which rejoin the question from Ambassador of Finland. Second, from Daniel Wambunu, why is that there is no African stock exchange to trade African currencies? This is there. So now we'll just give 1 minute to each of our panelists to just tell us, maybe we cannot respond to all discussion. What is the specific takeaway that you will recommend from this discussion? If there is one single thing that we should be doing, just tell us in 1 minute, please. I will go around. Prime Minister Desale.
I think the sole responsibility largely rests on African political leaders. And if they can, lead their people, the African Continental Free Trade Area can be implemented smoothly and efficiently. So I would like to say leadership is critical.
Wonderful. Thank you for your conciseness. Minister Biruta?
Yes, my camera is switched off, but I can see all of you. There was a question about what we are going to do to make sure everyone understands the CFTA and the benefits which come with the CFTA and the free movement of people. I think for the free movement of people, it is very simple. When you tell people that they can move from one place to another without going through formalities and application for visas and so on and so forth, it is very easy. People understand it very well, and it goes fast. But for the CFTA, I think we need really to invest in the dissemination of the instrument, in the education and in mobilization of the business community so that everyone understands what it is and what it means for them and what are the opportunities which are attached to it. And that is work which should be done by the leaders and every country should have a program to disseminate the CFTA and to educate people about it so that they can understand and really catch the opportunities which will come with it. Otherwise, for the free movement of people, you just let people know that they can move from one place to another. They will understand very, very quickly. Otherwise, education, dissemination of these instruments should be part of the program when we talk about these continental agreements. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Biruta.
Yes,
Steve,
I was going to say that it's not too late. It's not.
Where you would recommend outsourcing.
Thank you. It's not too late to engage with the citizens, and this is responding to the question from the ambassador of Finland. Countries are now in the process of coming up with the AFCFTA national strategies, and we are working very closely on this with our partners, the African Union, and other partners who support integration in the continent. And in the design of these AFCFTA national strategies and their implementation plans, the way it is happening, there is continuous stakeholders engagement. And I think what we need to do here is that in the implementation, let's continue engaging the stakeholders at all levels. And my final word, which relates to what Emmanuel Benza said, if we succeed in the implementation of the AFCFTA and it starts having a positive impact in terms of the lives of people because they can see additional income because of stable businesses and stable incomes, almost everything else that the African Union will engage in, the citizens will always be using the benchmark of the AFCFTA, telling them, we want to see you do the same in all these other frameworks that you are doing. I mean, the AU is leading on behalf of our continent. So let me end there. Basically, my last word is engage everyone at all levels, including in the implementation of the AFCFTA.
Brian, just give me 1 minute to just say, I think this was a very lively discussion, very interesting one. I'm sure that we have raised probably more problem and issue that we provided answer, but I'm sure institutes, universities, and think tanks are also here to pick on those issues to help us to comprehend. I'm not sure in 1.5 hours we'll be able to cover all these issues, but what we can take is really that in this discussion about the CFTA, the regional integration and Pan-Africanism, is that leadership matters. Leadership matters, collective leadership matters. All part of our society should be mobilized. Civil society, community, private sector, university, everybody should be on board. That CFTA should also be about implementation. When we make commitment, we have to follow suit. That's very important for our own credibility. That for CFTA to be a reality, we really need to have physical connectivity among our countries, not to mention also digital connectivity, which is very important. CFTA should also be about self-reliance of Africa, creating opportunity and market and among ourselves. It should also remind us of the urgency to implement this CFTA given the pandemic that is hitting many African countries. It's also looking at the CFTA as a source for financing the development of the continent beyond aid. This is also very important. CFTA should be CFTA, Pan-Africanism, regional integration, all should be about people first. Let us make sure that this connection remains, because whatever we are doing is about people. When we are talking about people, what is very important in terms of governance also is to have inclusive society, inclusive leadership, inclusive governance system, so that no one is left behind in our society while we are also promoting wealth creation. What is also important is invest in our young people. Invest in the technical training, invest in the skill development so that we can be able to respond to this challenge of creating 12 million jobs for our young people to lessen the insecurity for ourselves. Do we have the choice between making peace first or building our economies? Minister Biruta is sharing with us his wisdom that we don't have the choice. We have to do both. We have to walk, we have to run at the same time. So it's not to do one thing and to forget about the others. So I think that's what I can just say really after this discussion. It's impossible to summarize. We have so many issues, but it's been a privilege. I would want to thank Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn. Thank you for spending your time with us. Minister Biruta from Rwanda, thank you for your contribution. Also, Stephen Karingi, thank you for all your insightful comment and analysis that you share with us. Above all, I want to thank all the participants in the room and outside of this room for your understanding, your participation to this event. And I want to thank Tana Forum for having given me the opportunity to be part of this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Prime Minister, Excellency Desalegn, in the English, when you sneeze, amongst the English, they say bless you. But then I learned in the new way of doing things that when a person has done a good job, they say bless me. So, Ambassador Abdoulaye Diop, bless you for a great job, great facilitation, and you have already thanked the panelists. We will release you for a short tea break of 18 minutes, then we come in for our closing session. But thank you so much for your patience, for your participation. To those of you online and offline, somebody said this year you are not telling that many stories. Come back after the break. I have 2 stories for you. You will never forget them. So enjoy your break. See you in 18 minutes. Thank you. I promised that I would tell just 2 stories. I have a very short period within which to tell the stories. Some of the people who were threatening me are not yet in the room, so I assume that they intend on missing out on the stories. The next panel is a very special panel. I will soon call upon the moderator of that panel. But the reason why it is a very special panel is this has the actual leaders of Africa, the youth, and these are not just youth, they are youth activists, intellectuals, thinkers, innovators. They will be introduced, but just in case you doubt that they are here, I'm just going to ask them, can you give some Tana love to the people online so that they know that you are alive? You're looking too serious. Yeah, so the 2 little stories, someone will translate the story. The first story is about a king the king called a lot of young people this age and said, succession will no longer happen on the basis of lineage. I'm going to set a process by which succession will happen. So the king called 2 young ladies and 2 young men that had been selected on the basis of their excellence in various fields of endeavor. And the king gave each one of them a seed and said to them, you have exactly 12 weeks within which to grow this seed. Whoever returns and their seed has grown bigger or better or greater than the other will succeed me as king. You don't have to wait until you are old. So these people took their seeds and then planted them. It was a seed of a rare tree in their village. When they planted the tree, they all observed separately, because this was deemed a competition, that the seeds were not growing, they're not germinating. So 3, the 2 men and 1 woman, determined that they were not going to lose the opportunity of a lifetime to seize power through the seed. So, because the seed of that tree could be found in the village, the 3 quickly went and found an alternative seed. They were being disruptive and innovative. They planted the seed, and of course it germinated into a tall tree. It was a quick growing seed. The one young lady felt that maybe she was not qualified for this job anyway. She didn't find the alternative seed. After the 12 weeks, they went back to His Excellency the King, and then the king said, show me your trees. The one young lady stood there with a seed in her hand, and the other 3 had various lengths of tree. And the king observed, inspected, as one would inspect these trees, and then afterwards said, I'm impressed. Tell me what you did. So each one described process. I then did this and did this. This is how my seed grew. Then he came to the young lady and said, and you? The young lady said, I did everything possible. The seed that you gave did not germinate. So I have brought back the seed. The king went and mounted himself in the kingly chair and then declared that the young lady with the seed was his successor. Everybody was outraged. This is against even biblical approaches. They demanded that the king explains. The king said the test was not to grow a tree. The test was in leadership, was one of values and accountability. You 3, there is no way you could have grown the seed. I gave each one of you a boiled seed. If you brought me a tree, that means it's not the seed that I gave you. It was a test of values, of accountability, of honesty. So the other story I'll tell you when the session finishes, so that you can concentrate. Allow me to welcome Dr. Jonas, who's the director of the Institute for Peace and Security Studies, who are the hosts of the Tana Forum. And I've always claimed that the Tana Secretariat and IPSS are infected by a disease of humility or subversion. They call us, and unlike most people who organize conferences, they don't mount themselves. They sit and allow everybody else to take the glory. But for this particular session, we would like to invite you, Prof, to come and lead us on. I'll come back when you are done to tell my last story,
and we'll call it a day. Ladies and gentlemen, our host, why don't you give him a pam-pam as he comes?
Thank you very much indeed for that extremely generous introduction, Brian, as always. Thank you, esteemed audience, far and near, those who are listening to us while relaxing in your best opportunities that you have at home as well as at work. At the same time, in spirit, you are with us. We can see you are following us. Thank you for honoring us by your presence. And I'm sure you've been following earnestly what's been done so far in Tana Forum, particularly the first 2 days, and now the third day we are entering in. The summary that came out today, the fourth summary, because they had 4 takeaways. The first one focuses on investing in the youth. I think our future lies in our youth, indeed. And then, if we really like to make meaning out of AFCFTA, then we should definitely see how the young themselves see what it is, what it means to them, what's their take, what's their imagination, and what's their thinking as future leaders. So, I think one of the leadership quality is keeping that value Brian told us, being honest, prepared, accountable, and at the same time, of course, take responsibility. Luckily, taking responsibility starts from taking oneself responsibility. So rather than trying to tell who these people are, why don't I allow them to introduce themselves? Let me start from my left here. My dear brother, could you just introduce yourself, who you are?
Thank you, Dr. Jonas, for the opportunity, and also greetings to your excellencies and all the distinguished guests. My name is Darlington Chuma, and I'm one of the essay winners. Should I stop here?
Thank you very much indeed. And please, yes.
Your Excellencies, my name is Mr. Nnamani Chikezie. I'm from Nigeria. Thank the organizers and moderators for the opportunity given to us to speak about AFTA. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. And finally,
hello all. Thank you very much. My name is Sanyi Getu. I'm from Baradar University, Peace and Conflict Studies. Thank you for having us here. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you very much. So, as you might have seen in the very schedule, it says 15 minutes, but when we are left with about 30 minutes to come to the podium, we were given just 30 minutes, not 45 minutes. 15 minutes each, now down to 10 minutes each. And from 10 minutes each, maybe to 7 minutes each. Simply because that is testing of flexibility, how much we can quickly fit not only into new normal during COVID, that is, rather than having that excellent special place in Tana Forum, as now we are learning to live together, also we are trying to manage our time. So they wrote excellent essays. We had a number of students from those university students. These 3 essays have been selected by their merits as representing the very theme of Tana 2020. So our presentation is going to be sort of conversational type. And if I just start with the last, because he introduced last, so he will start first. So could you just tell us the central idea of your essay, which focuses on, of course, AFCFTA?
Thank you very much. Let me begin with this saying of mine. I believe with this African continental free trade area, every single state of Africa is going to be making Africa great within a few decades, or destroying Africa if they do not continually cooperate and work together. Thank you very much for having me. I am the 3rd place winner of the annual Tana Forum. entitled with the implication of the latest political development in the Horn of Africa for the utilization of African Continental Free Trade Area and its impediments. So the central argument or the core point of my essay was that the political developments that has been undertaken since 2018, which is since the coming of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, has the developments that has been undertaken in the region in general has the positive implications for utilizing this our grand idea, African Continental Free Trade Area. That was the core, the central argument of my essay.
Excellent. In your essay, Saini, you identified 4 pillars that motivate people to come together, particularly regional integration, as pushed by affection, threat, gain, and the power. Great. So affection, needing each other. Gain, coming together as better than being isolated. Threat, there are so many different threats that could possibly threaten people from the very existence. And power, that power aspect again, almost always united we can be more powerful, or simply unity is strength, as is said. So how does this apply for CFTA or AFCFTA in your views?
Thank you very much. There was many rationales to become to integrate it for the African or for any world. So African countries have to come together to have a mutual beneficiary and to work together. I'm not as such, I have prepared to present first.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me begin with, many has been said with this African Continental Free Trade Area. I'm not going to explain it as such, but to give you a summary of African Continental Free Trade Area, it increases competitiveness of Africa in the global world. It may boost employment opportunities. It may create job opportunities for the young Africans. So I think unemployment was, I believe that unemployment was the main problems of Africa and the nature of the problems of the young peoples and the problems that Africa is facing. So this, utilizing this African Continental Free Trade Area may boost employment opportunities for the young, and also it is an instrument for the solidarity. Above all, it realizes the spirit of envisioned Pan-Africanism. So it is known that Horn of Africa is synonymous with the conflict, instabilities, and extra. However, since the coming of Abiy Ahmed, there was many developments that has been undertaken. And also in the region, there was many developments that are undergoing. Like there was a political transition in Sudan, in South Sudan, and also there is an ongoing political reform in Ethiopia. So previously, for instance, Ethiopia is not giving a priorities for the sub-regions. Rather, Ethiopia is giving extra regional states. But since the coming of Prime Minister, Ethiopia starts to give priorities to the sub-region, to the integration of integrating with the neighboring countries. So there is also the developments that is. I would like to say that there was a growing trust between the states, between the neighboring countries, that may help to utilize, because in order to have a integration, in order to have a cooperation between the states, trust has to be developed, and there must be the relation between the states must be normal and predictable. So the developments that has been taken since 2018 may give us a hope to fully utilize African Continental Free Trade Area in the regions. So there was also an impediments that I tried to look up. The first one is the poor and inadequate infrastructures, internal political insecurities. Despite many developments, there is also some in the internal politics. There was problems despite many developments. So it may also challenge the political the utilization of African Continental Free Trade Area. And also the terror group operating in Somalia and the like may also be an impediment or challenges to fully utilize African Continental Free Trade Area. And also the suspicion and the trust, there was increasing trust, distrust and suspicion between the states in the Horn of Africa, which may bring a challenge for the utilization of this thing. So in general, it is important that countries in the Horn of Africa and beyond strengthen the ongoing political developments. That means Africa needs more political developments than undertaken, resolve disputes among disputes among themselves, engaging in activities that further minimize distrusts and competitions, engage with activities that enhance transparency. To sum up, the duration of the journey towards full implementation of African Continental Free Trade Area depends on dedicated and visionary leadership coupled with strong political will. The leaders of Africa should have to have a political will to fully utilize African Continental Free Trade Area. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. That definitely aligns with what His Excellency Prime Minister Malas, or rather Hailemariam Desalegn was talking about, how this CFCFTA can go down to leadership and political will and commitment. Great. Let's move on to Nigeria, this time to ECOWAS aspect. And yes, please, your summary of the entire point of your essay.
My essay focused mainly on the challenges that can hamper the smooth operation of AFTA, or things that can prevent AFTA from achieving her goals in Africa. Although I have to introduce, in my essay, the potential benefits of the free trade participation in Africa. Now, these challenges are things like terrorism, armed struggle, drug and human trafficking. But the most important, my main point, focused on neocolonialism as a threat to AFTA achievements. Thank you.
Excellent indeed. Thank you very much. And you may, of course, have more questions later on coming, so let me come back to Darlington, to South Africa, please.
Thank you, Dr. Eros. So I tackled my essay, the CFTA, a milestone for Pan-Africanism and conflict transformation. And the overarching argument in my essay is that beyond the economic dividends of the CFTA, it presents Africa with opportunities to build, consolidate, and enhances peace and security prospects. And I'm actually happy that this, the Tana Forum has actually convened a platform for this, because I thought this was it was a missing discussion in terms of trying to understand how the CFTA work. A lot of discussions and deliberations have tended to give an economic perspective. So I'm not going to go into the details and overview of the CFTA, but then I'll just measure on the core argument of my essay. So one of the points that I make is that while those that crafted the CFTA may not have conceived it as a peace and security response initiative, when fully implemented, it promises to fundamentally transform the peace and security landscape of the continent. And how do we, or how so? So the first point is obviously integrating economies, so it provides incentives for countries to work, collaborate, to prevent any or preempt any threats to peace and security. And secondly, by opening up the continent to entrepreneurship, young people that are enterprising. So it creates jobs, in a way, youth empowerment that also has a direct link with instability and insecurity that often arises from a sense of economic marginalization and disempowerment. Last but not least, it also provides a platform for Pan-Africanism and a platform to engage or have African-led solutions to peace and security on the continent, and also, of course, reduce donor dependence. And then, obviously, I mean, when we look at this, there also, the CFTA is not a magic bullet for the challenges of peace and security in Africa. On its own, it also presents, or it is a source of conflict and insecurity. And this revolves around how countries are going to work around the implementation of the CFTA. For example, countries like the G7, Zimbabwe, where I come from, they've expressed support for the CFTA, but they've also raised concern that they face unique and specific development challenges. So I'm thinking that Zimbabwe is just next to South Africa, a huge economy that supplies almost 50% dominate 50% of the regional trade in the region. So how is then CFTA going to work around some of these challenges without actually causing conflict on its own? And also linked to that, issues of dumping and emerging, or countries like Zimbabwe trying to protect their industries, their infant industries. So how does the CFTA work around some of these challenges? And also linked to that is there are some potential challenges that are likely to undermine the implementation of the agreement, and some of them include the threat of terrorism, border securitization. We saw what happened in Nigeria and Niger with the closing of the border, and also the impact of global health emergencies like we saw with the coronavirus. And the question, therefore, is, as countries prepare to recover post-COVID-19, are they going to open their economies, or we're likely to see countries being more protectionist to protect jobs and also their industries? So I put a few recommendations in my essay, and one of them is that the CFTA cannot expect to be an effective trade and economic institution if it lacks the capacity to address economic and political deficits that continue to undermine the integration process on the continent. And secondly, the CFTA must ensure, or the Secretariat rather, must ensure that it has the capacity and will to address conflicts that arise from the implementation of the CFTA. And also related to that is the point about the dispute settlement mechanism, which has been put forward as a mechanism for resolving some of the challenges that are highlighted. But that on its own also creates problems because African countries have a poor record of engaging with dispute mechanisms as they relate with the World Trade Organization. So these are some of the challenges that the CFTA presents from a peace and security perspective. And maybe as a way of rounding up, yeah, it is important. Visionary, inclusive, and committed leadership is what is going to determine the success and or the full success of the CFTA in both the short and long term. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Just taking up from the last point that, as you put forward as recommendation, visionary and inclusive leadership as a way out to realize the AFCFTA. But at the same time, Darlington and many, of course, all of you just realize across Africa, one of the serious problems that Africa faces today is youth unemployment. And at the same time again, youth being both dividend, that is population dividend, as well as at the same time deficit. For instance, if we just come to Horn of Africa, where the first president, Hussein, represented, we have that difficulty of Al-Shabaab. When we move on to my brother to West Africa, we have, of course, Boko Haram. And when we come to South Africa, we have xenophobia, Africans being against Africans. But we all are youth, we are all looking for better Africa where we can safely travel without any need of visa or even any different passport, just only one being enough, being African enough, as our color shows internationally, globally. So, but we have this obstacle. So as the young would-be leaders, yourselves, imaginative leaders, innovative leaders, transformative leaders tomorrow, what do you recommend so as to realize this Pan-Africanism, this Africa we want, which is part of Agenda 2063? Shall I start with Nigeria first?
I believe I should go through my essay.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe that when youths are given the opportunity, after free trade participation in Africa, the young intellectuals among African youths can be able to pilot and revitalize the African economy through ensuring free trade participation in African nations. Now, let me go through my essay. The African Free Continental Free Trade Area, as we all know, is an operation that has been instrumental to fostering the unity and socio-economic integration in Africa. The free trade participation, when African nations participate in free trade, there are a lot of potential benefits, like economic integration, cross-border investments, exchange of ideas, increase in innovations. Also, this can lead to reduction of goods and services, reduction of prices in goods and services across the country and the continent. And when these occur, it can lead to economic growth. When there is economic growth in Africa, this can generate employment and reduce poverty. And I believe once poverty is reduced in Africa, crimes and violence will reduce, because poverty and unemployment is the driver of crimes and violence, conflicts. Inside, we know what is happening in South Africa when young black South Africans feel that foreigners are taking over their jobs. So these lack of jobs are also fueling crimes and conflicts in the society. So consolidation in free trade participation in Africa can crystallize the AU idea of having a single market in Africa, like having a single unified market in Africa. And for ease of trade and operation of this single market, this can lead to the creation of a single currency, just like the Europe have the single currency euro. And at the same time, it can also lead to having a unified customs union, like the same way Europe has the European Unified Customs Union. So I believe the free trade participation among African nations have a lot of potential benefits. And free trade participation among European nations is one of the things that made Europe to have peace and security. These also can ensure peace and security in Africa. It can also lead to a rapid ratification of the protocol on free movement of people, because it's not only goods that will be moving across the borders. The people that are going to invest in other countries also need easy access across these borders in order to make investments, visit their businesses, and for the people to equally move freely and have easy access to these borders. We also need a unified passport in Africa, a single African Union passport. These are the potential benefits free trade participation can do in Africa. Now, let me move to the challenges that can hamper the smooth operation of Africa. There are 4 points, challenges that can hamper the smooth operation of Africa. One is terrorism. The second is armed struggling. The third is human and drug trafficking, while the fourth is neocolonialism. Now, the first, second, and third, I'll just explain them little because previous speakers have talked about fears of terrorism, human armed struggling, and others. Like in terrorism, there are fears that when borders are open, when people move freely across the borders and across the nations, that there may be influx of extremist groups and fundamental extremist terrorist organizations into the countries. For example, in my country, Nigeria, for over a decade, 10 years, we have been battling the influx of Boko Haram terrorists Even they have formed alliance with Islamic State, known as Islamic State in West African province. So I believe when borders are open like that, Boko Haram can migrate to other West African countries and even other regions in African countries. So these are one of the fears and one of the challenges that have to have, the fears of terrorism. Also the fears of arms smuggling, because when goods are moved freely across the borders, some criminal elements among us can use the opportunity in smuggling arms. And this will also, towards the little goal the AU, African Union, has made recently in silencing the guns. So the same thing also happens in human and drug trafficking. When there are free movement of persons across without pure security checks, I think people can easily traffic human, which is more rampant in African countries. Now, the main one, which is neocolonialism. Most of us, especially African leaders, we like to shy away from the reality of external forces in controlling the economies of Africa. Beginning from the middle of the 20th century, most African countries gained their independence, but what we gain is just political independence. Up to now, we have not gained economic independence. African countries has remained, the economy of Africa has remained integrated with the economy of our colonial masters, Europe and even America. For example, the resources of Africa is the main target. Africa is the richest continent in the world by virtue of natural resources. But at the same time, in reality, Africa is the poorest continent. Why? Because after these Western forces left Africa, they also continue their economic exploitation. When they left, the corporations they left in Africa continue to exploit our resources, ship it to their countries, where these resources and raw materials are being turned into manufactured goods, and then sent back, resold to Africa at value-added price. And these continue to develop their own economy and having their own industrial sector develop, while our own industrial sector remain in limbo and our economies continue to be suppressed. Even our leaders are not helping matters. In my country, Nigeria is the highest oil producing country in Africa. This year is the 60th year we have independence. But up to now, highest oil producing country in Africa, we have not yet started refining our oil maximally. Our oil is still being shipped outside the country, refined, brought back to Nigeria with increased added value tax and others, and continue to impoverish the citizens. So these are the things. Our economies in Africa are still being integrated with the economies of Western forces. And they will never let Africans go unless we stamp our feet on it. Now also,
could you summarize it?
Okay. Few countries that has tried to remain economically independent. For example, Libya. We saw what happened in 2011 in Libya when late Colonel Muammar Gaddafi, a foremost Pan-Africanist, tried to make his country economic and resources independent. Some Western forces subtly introduced conflict in the country, and that was how Gaddafi was uprooted. And up to today, Libya has remained a shadow of itself. The same thing is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country full rich with a lot of mineral resources, gold, diamond, uranium. The same thing happened in South Sudan. These are the things that foremost Pan-Africanists and Pan-Africanist writers like Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, lamented in his book, 1965 book, titled Neocolonialism, the Last Stage of Imperialism. The same thing that Frantz Fanon lamented in his 1961 book, titled The Wretched of the Earth, when he lamented about the continuous suppression of African economies by Western forces. The same thing that Walter Rodney, the Ghana Pan-Africanist writer and revolutionary scholar, wrote in his 1972 book entitled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. All these Pan-Africanists continue to lament the continuous suppression. Okay. Now, if we want after to achieve its maximum potentials and achieve its goals of having an integrated economy in Africa, having a growth, peace and security in Africa, African leaders will have to develop the political will of calling the bluff of Western forces and calling their own intellectuals, technocrats, economists to design a African-centered economic policy that will lead to the growth of Africa and success of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your passion and commitment. That's quite interesting. I also like to see this one in action as you move on to as a young leader in the future, God willing. So let's come quickly to Darlington. Just I'll give you 2 minutes to very quickly reflect on the question I put forward. Quickly.
Unemployment is in my view, a very big issue on the continent, and it's quite unfortunate that a lot of young people find themselves at the mercy of that. But again, what's the way forward? I think there's an important opportunity with the CFTA, like it has been alluded to. But also there's a responsibility, I think, that lies with those that are responsible for implementing this policy to actually engage, the young people themselves and see how they can benefit from this through discussions like platforms like this, but also through civil society organizations. And of course, I'm not really privy to what's happening, but I want to believe that the CFTA could have maybe or has a youth task force or something like that would be responsible for going out and raising awareness on what it intends to achieve and how young people can actually participate in it. Yeah.
Excellent. Sanyi, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I believe that most of the problems of the youth is that in the Horn of Africa, and particularly in the Africa in general, is that unemployment. If also I believe that what makes most of the conflicts in the Horn of Africa and in Africa also in general violent is that what gives the conflict, the nature of the conflict violent is that losing of hope, not having hope, which is unemployment, extremely unemployment, that makes the region and the Africa. And so I believe that African Continental Free Trade Area will change this and give hope for the youth to the future journey, their life of journey. It may give us a hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Daniel Wambuno has this question, one of our audience who've been participating there. Africa needs an economic development program funded by all states to ensure that no state is left behind. What do you think young Pan-Africans like yourselves can do to realize them? I hope the question is clear. May I repeat maybe for you to make it clear? Okay. Africa needs an economic development. This is almost a summary of Africa First book we had previously, yesterday, the day before yesterday was launched. In it, the center is, if you are thinking of development, first have, if you are talking about African development, have Africans, African national, African feelings, Ethiopian, South African, Nigerian feeling. Not going down to ethnic or clannish thinking, so that one society is left behind, one country is left behind, others are forerunners. So as to avoid this and promote equitable development, as young Africanists, what are your imaginations, your thinking? Can I start with you?
Yeah, I think that's quite a difficult question, because I don't think there's anywhere in the world where there's equal development, but probably we might want to have a conversation around equitable development. But then what role can young people, play within that arrangement? I think it lies with young people actually getting opportunities to dialogue and speak with policymakers, but not just to speak, to be actually present in those platforms and make the decisions that they want to see. Yeah.
You're right. So your suggestion is that if we are talking about inclusive development, then let's also get into the decision making together. So let's decide together so that we can also develop together. If you remember, one of the youth agenda is don't decide anything about youth in absence of youth, which means inclusivity. So if you want to have all countries on board, if you like them to be developed together in a just and equitable way, then they also have they must have the same voice as well. But can I just have more voice from Nigeria, if you like?
The economic developments of Africa, as I continue to emphasize, remain in the hands of youth of Africa. We've had since the middle of 20th century, when our leaders have continued, most of our leaders are over 30, 40 years, and the economic blueprint of their nations has remained the same and has never produced any potential results. In order to develop Africa, we have to try the young intellectuals who can infuse their energy, intellectual energy, for economic emancipation and development of Africa. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much indeed. Sanya, your reflection? Yes.
Right, as I've said earlier, most of the problems and the thing that push the young people of Africa to become a narrow or something else was unemployment. And putting young in a stage, their ideas, and including them in every decisions that has been taken will be the solutions. Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. It's been really wonderful. So let me now invite people inside here before I move on to His Excellency Brian, who is already looking into my eyes rather than at me. So any question from the audience here? We have someone from virtual, that is Daniel from the virtual. Can I have one or two questions from the audience here? Apparently not being very tired. Hopefully not. Great. The Future of Africa have presented their essay, their thinking about AFC, free trade in Africa, the areas that people can freely trade from west to east, from south to north, north to south, and to the center, how these people can have their own imagination. They try to show through their imagination. They also had excellent summaries as well as conclusions the way forward. From that, I think 3 points are sort of takeaways. The first one is, please give hope for the youth. I think it's hope. That is a motto of life as a whole. As we come here, in hope that we are going to have some discussions, some deliberations, some networking, just something, hope. Definitely where there is hope, there must be life as well. So they gave us this hope, because they also are hope of the continent as well. The second one, if we mean to have AFCFA, then we must have hope. I think that's a very important point. I would say so. The second point I put forward is leadership and leadership coming back, which of course in the previous session, we had leadership being emphasized. This time they added 3 adjectives: innovative leadership, inclusive leadership, visionary leadership. They came out because it is leadership deficit that led people into conflict and poverty. And then they just come down, the last one was political commitment, quite different from simple leadership. Commitment, not simply, I'll give you this, I'll do this, I'll do that. Brian comes to my mind 3 or 4 Tanas ago. He was giving us what's meant by election campaign pledge, election promise. So it's not simply election time promise, but a real promise and then delivering. So they are telling us that political commitment as the key for AFCFTA to be implemented in the near future. That's what the visions are, and their essays will be published and also will be sent to you as part of the report. So I think I should thank you so very much indeed for attention. Excellently presented essay. Thank you so very much indeed. Shall we give them applause? 1, 2, 3, please, wherever we are. Well done, well done. Thank you very much indeed. Right.
Jonas and Africa's real leadership, we thank you, mindful that you are here representing a whole generation. I thought to read you a quote from Mzee Mwalimu Nyerere, who says, "Peace is born of hope. When hope is gone, there will be social upheavals." And just one more last quote from Nyerere says, "The development of peoples means a rebellion." And then also online, we were joined by Ayob Balcha, who says to us as Tana Forum, "In today's high-level forum, the topic of youth has been raised by panelists a number of times. Our conversations about African youth, African young people need more nuances and contextualization. Let's move beyond the generic and at times empty jargon of youth bulge, time bomb, demographic dividend, and broad recommendations such as invest in young people. Such decontextualized framings of discussions about African young people have more to conceal than to reveal. African young people are too diverse to fit into these categories. The life experiences and day-to-day challenges of African young people fall between the cracks of these broad categorizations. How can we see active and energetic Africans if we frame them as a bulge? Where is the room to recognize the daily contribution of young workers, soldiers, innovators, teachers, etc., if they are framed as a time bomb? Applying the principles and ideals of the finance sector and talking about investing in young people as a policy recommendation lacks a deeper understanding of the multi-layered and complex challenges that African young people are facing based on their gender, socioeconomic status, geographic location, religious affiliation, sociocultural identity, etc. Nowadays, every policy forum on African young people brush the topic of youth with these broad categories, and the outcomes remain less convincing. Let's have honest discussions about what AFCFTA means for the rural young woman, for young migrants, for the young cross-border trader, for the young innovators, or young politician. Otherwise, we will keep on saying the same thing in every platform again and again without any tangible outcome. That's Ayob Balcha, who's been following our conversation. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Jonas, for steering us in this session. I promised you a story, so if you have patience, I will tell the second story of the day. You see, African traditions are about storytelling. Every revolution, Amilcar Cabral said, is first a cultural revolution. If you can't tell your own story, it will be told by somebody else. And that's why we had a proverb that says, it's a tragedy when the story is told by the hunter, right? To describe what happened. So, we had, Africa is a very amazing place. It's the only place where art or genius can happen without anybody putting a monetary price to it. A young tax administrator, TAX administrator, who had just qualified in Uganda, went to Karamoja, and anyone who knows about the Karamojong will know that they live a pastoralist life. And this young tax administrator had been very successful in the urban areas, so came to Karamoja. The elders were gathered, and the young tax administrator said, "Elders, the people of Karamoja, my government would like to build you schools and hospitals. My government would like to build deep tanks for your cattle. But for us to be able to do this, we need you to pay tax." And of course, he was observing that the people of Karamoja or Karamojong have a lot of cattle wealth. And then a young man, feeling agitated, stood up and spat on the floor. Amongst the Karamojong, that's a sign of disgust or disapproval. An elder stood up and slapped the young man and said, "In our culture, we don't disrespect visitors." And then the elder stood up and said, "Mr. Tax Commissioner, what you are promising is very noble. To build us schools and hospitals and deep tanks. Here is my suggestion on how we do it. Why don't you put your tax collectors at the gate of the school and at the deep tank mouth and at the gate of the hospital, so that anyone bringing their child can pay tax." If you know anything about the Karamojong, of course, they don't go to those schools, they don't go to those deep tanks, they don't go. The moral of that little story is simple. There are certain solutions that sound great, compelling, because where we got them from, they make sense. But in our context, they are totally senseless. The spirit of Tana is to say to all of us as we prepare for tomorrow, we are not model missionaries of things that have worked in Europe or the US or Asia. Nor are we model mercenaries who, knowing that a particular economic development trajectory does not work, we will continue to push it because it gets us funding. The critical challenge that we are facing in this room and beyond, those who are following us on social media, is that COVID has disrupted Pan-Africanism. COVID has disrupted the normalization of abnormal economic paradigms that told us that development would trickle down. What COVID is forcing us as Africans to do is not to run our lives based on memory of our heroic struggles only of the past, but to combine memory, because a lot of young people say, don't talk about colonialism, imperialism, you talked about neo-colonialism. Let's just talk about the future and technology. But the truth of the matter is memory is a terrain of struggle. Memory is a terrain of struggle, and I repeat this at every conference I go to. If anyone can persuade you to forget your history, your pain, your victories, they will persuade you to forget your value. The second thing, though, which is what I heard you to be saying, and I'm not youth-splaining, is that elders or the eldership, we cannot run Africa based purely on memory. We have to have an imagination that captures the energy of youth, the possibilities of the future, and also the opportunities of the COVID context. And that pain of imagination does not come from years of experience only. It comes from the disruptive thinking of those who are not shackled by the past or detained by fear. So, having told you that story, I wanted to invite you to tomorrow. Why am I inviting you to tomorrow? COVID has disrupted Pan-Africanism. Because I am sorry, as an African, I don't understand why we keep saying building back better. What are you building back to as an African? Explain to me, what are you building back to? The disinvestment in public health, the disinvestment in education, What are you building back to? That's why I read Prime Minister Mahama's report to be saying building forward differently, because the economic process and paradigm we followed before COVID was wrong. That's why we had no hospitals, no oxygen, no infrastructure, no policy that was sufficient. We thank God for the resilience of the Africans and what we've been able to do. The second, this leave no one behind. I think it's best said to Americans and best said to our friends from the West. If you are from Asia or Latin America, we have a saying which Liverpool took and never paid us for it, which says, never walk alone. The essence of Pan-Africanism is that none of our economies are viable as the little entities, that we are better together. So the African bit is not leave no one behind, is go nowhere alone. Not as a little country, not as a big country. I hope you've enjoyed today. I hope you are enjoying yourself. I hope when you come back tomorrow, you will answer the question that Ayob Balcha and these young people have asked. I would like to apologize as the program director. We have had a disproportionate representation of males, and this is really something we could and would have avoided, except that we had last minute withdrawals, and trying to do replacements sometimes doesn't quite work. We offer no excuses. Tana is about excellence. When you return to the next Tana, there will be no man else. When you come to the next Tana, it will not just be a group of elders talking, and the youth panel will not be a ghetto. We have heard you. We are constantly changing for the best. It's my 9th Tana or your 8th or your 7th. I can assure you we've never done a virtual one before, and this one is better than the last, and the next will be better than this one. May God bless you. Enjoy your evening. Another pom-pom for the essay winners. I never won an essay myself, so anyone who can win an essay is more intelligent than me. Thank you.